This wasn't about justice. Not really. It was about money. 4,000 years ago, long before banks, before stock markets, before economists even had the word economy, one ruler saw something almost nobody else understood. Civilizations don't collapse because people are immoral. They collapse because financial rules fail. And when those rules fail, violence follows. Welcome to The Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it seems. When most people hear the name Hammurabi, they think vengeance, an eye for an eye, a brutal world where justice was carved in stone and mercy didn't exist. That image is convenient. It's simple, but it's almost entirely wrong. Because when you strip away the mythology and actually read what was written on that stone slab around 1754 BCE, you find something uncomfortable. The Code of Hammurabi wasn't a moral document. It was a financial document. Out of nearly 300 laws, the overwhelming majority had nothing to do with murder, assault, or revenge. They dealt with loans, wages, contracts, interest, collateral, defaults, liability, debt. In short, the things that quietly decide who survives and who doesn't. Babylon wasn't a philosophical experiment. It was a commercial machine sitting at the crossroads of major trade routes. It moved grain, silver, livestock, land, labor, credit. Farmers borrowed against future harvests. Merchants financed long-distance trade. Builders constructed homes and infrastructure. Everything depended on trust, and trust without enforcement doesn't scale. Without shared rules, every bad harvest becomes a personal disaster. Every unpaid loan becomes a blood feud. Every collapsed house becomes an excuse for violence. Hammurabi didn't inherit a peaceful society and decided to moralize it. He inherited a volatile economic system and decided to stabilize it. Here's the part most people miss. The code wasn't about making people good. It was about making outcomes predictable. Because unpredictability is what kills economies. When no one knows who's responsible for a loss, trade stops, credit disappears, people retreat into force. Hammurabi understood that the fastest way to stop chaos wasn't to lecture people about ethics, but to define who pays when things go wrong. The moment you define liability, you change behavior. You create incentives. You create a system. In ancient Mesopotamia, debt wasn't abstract. If a farmer borrowed grain and the harvest failed, he didn't default on a spreadsheet. He defaulted in real life. His land could be seized. His children could be taken as debt servants. His family could disappear into bondage over a single bad season. Unchecked, this kind of debt spiral didn't just ruin individuals. It hollowed out the tax base, destabilized food production, and increased unrest. A society drowning its own producers in permanent debt doesn't last long. So the code imposed limits, not out of compassion, out of necessity. Interest was capped. Debt servitude was time-limited instead of lifelong. In certain circumstances, debts could be suspended after natural disasters. These weren't acts of mercy. They were acts of risk management. Dead or enslaved farmers don't grow grain, and a king without grain doesn't stay king for long. Hammurabi wasn't protecting the poor. He was protecting the system that fed the empire. Then came contracts. Hammurabi's laws didn't care about intentions. They cared about outcomes. If a builder constructed a house and it collapsed, killing the owner, the builder paid the price. If a merchant lost goods entrusted to him, he was liable. Responsibility didn't disappear into excuses. This wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. When responsibility is clear, people price risk correctly, builders build better, merchants insure themselves. Trade becomes safer, not because people are kinder, but because consequences are known in advance. This is the quiet genius of the code. It didn't try to eliminate failure. It assigned it. Someone always paid. Once people knew who that someone would be, behavior changed. Wages and prices were treated the same way. The code laid out fixed payments for specific labor. Ox drivers earned this much, surgeons earned that much. Builders, shepherds, craftsmen, everyone. Standardization wasn't about fairness. It reduced conflict.
Every negotiation is friction. Every dispute is a potential breakdown. Hammurabi removed uncertainty. You knew what your labor was worth before you showed up, what you would be paid if things went well, what would happen if they didn't. Markets don't need kindness. They need consistency. But there's one more thing that shatters the romantic image of ancient justice. The rules weren't equal. Injury to a noble carried a different consequence than injury to a commoner. Financial liability flowed differently depending on status. This wasn't hypocrisy. It was design. Elites were protected because they held land, capital, and political power. Lower classes absorbed more risk because the system depended on it. This wasn't fairness. It was hierarchy preservation. Think about it. Bankruptcy laws exist to control failure. Debt relief isn't generosity. It prevents mass defaults. Central banks intervene not out of love for markets, but to stop collapse from spreading. 4,000 years separate Babylon from modern economies. The logic hasn't changed. Rules shape outcomes. Losses must be assigned. Power must be visible. Hammurabi's lesson was brutally honest. You don't control debt with virtue. You don't stabilize trade with good intentions. You prevent collapse by writing rules that make outcomes predictable. Even today, the same logic applies. Inflation isn't just rising prices. It's a redistribution of loss. It shifts pain away from borrowers onto holders of currency. Hammurabi did the same thing when he capped interest and suspended debts. He ensured the productive base of society wasn't devoured by the system itself. Modern societies talk endlessly about fairness and opportunity. Ancient Babylon didn't pretend everyone played the same game. The code told you where you stood, who paid when things went wrong. Morality wasn't the guiding principle. Survival was. Predictability created participation. Participation created growth. Growth created power. Hammurabi understood this 4,000 years ago. Chaos doesn't come from inequality alone. It comes from uncertainty. Financial freedom isn't believing the system is just. It's understanding how the system works. And once you understand that, history stops feeling like a distant story. It starts to feel uncomfortably familiar, because every civilization since has learned, usually the hard way. Debt binds, rules decide outcomes, power manages collapse before it manages justice. Hammurabi didn't promise fairness. He promised order. And in doing so, he revealed a truth most societies still resist. When money enters a society, someone always pays. The only real question is,